I was working on the staff at the church.
Okay.
As director of programming and parish life. And I did that for 24 years. And so I was pretty much involved in things around here. And had my office downstairs and everything was going.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Trinity Talks. My name is Kyla, and I am really excited to be sitting down with a couple of folks who are members here at Trinity and have a really interesting, really fun story to tell about the history of this church. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Kyla.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll start with an introduction. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Diane Toyson, and my husband and Dave and I have been coming to Trinity for 38 years.
Okay, wow. That's a long time. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And go ahead.
So I'm Wally Vogel. My wife Jane and I have been coming for 36 years.
Okay.
When we came, we were basically newlywed 20-somethings, and we're grandparents now. So that gives you some idea of the arc of our timeline.
A long time, yeah. So we're going to zoom in on a little bit of Trinity's history here. As Rob said in our service, the church is, 120 or more years old. But we're going to zoom in on the past 30 or so years. So in 1998, there was a fire here at Trinity that burned the whole building to the ground. But before that, there was actually some other changes that were taking place. So can you take us back to 1998, 1997? What was happening in the life of the church then?
Well, Harold Percy was our rector at the time, and things were really going strong.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people coming. We had 2 services at the time, at 9:15 and 11, and they were getting really packed. There were just not much room, and so we wanted to make room for more new people to join us. So we got space at the Hazel McCallion School and a gymnasium, and started having a 10 o'clock service there.
Okay.
And there were maybe 40 people that were over there, and our music director, John McDonald, would shuttle back and forth between the services to cover the music.
Okay.
And it was really an exciting time.
Sure.
We ended up calling it St. Hazel's.
Okay.
That's where we met.
Very cool. And so what was happening here at the building during that time?
So we were looking for ways to expand because while the school was a good satellite congregation, really people were tending to come in through the front doors here, spotting us on Queen Street. So we were really looking for a way to expand. The very first plan was to build, a lovely church right here that would house everybody. But the obstacles were we didn't have the budget. We didn't have the parking. And we would have trouble getting some of the city permits.
Okay.
So, with all those obstacles in our way, that project wasn't able to move forward. So we were really looking for alternatives, and we looked at everything. We were looking at leasing some industrial space up the street and what have you. So we were looking at all kinds of alternatives. And then I'll tell a little bit of a story. I'll try and tell it quickly. I remember I was at one of the last board meetings, probably 1997, and I was like a junior assistant warden, whatever. I was one of the new kids on the board, and we were talking about the building and saying, "Oh, we can't do anything for 5 years. We don't have the money. We don't have the parking, and so on and so forth." And I would, in my youthful exuberance, I was a little frustrated. I said, "We must be able to do something." And then Harold called me up the next morning, and everyone, of course, went, "Yeah, well, you don't know what you're talking about." And then the next morning, Harold called me up and he said, "Listen, what you said last night, let's get together and talk." And he actually had a bit of a dream that told him that, you kind of have to step out before things will happen. So we met at the time the keg was up the street. We met there and had lunch, and we're writing down what if we raised this much from the diocese? What if we did this? And Diane was there at lunch too, and she came by at our table and said, "What are you guys talking about?" And Harold picked up the napkin and he said, "We just built a church."
Okay.
So that was the beginning of the construction project.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So we also have a few photos to share to sort of help us tell this story a little bit. So the first picture we have is the original church building back in 1893. So obviously none of us were around to see this. But yeah, just this really, it's a very basic sort of building that, has the big brick steeple, very similar to our steeple today, but just a long sort of worship space. And then we have a picture of the building in 1962. And so you can see that there was an expansion built on the side of the building. So what was in that expansion space?
Well, that was called the Education Center, sort of. There was a middle hall.
Yeah.
That was sort of a meeting area. And then there was a parish hall on the upper level. Over on the extension. And then underneath, we had Sunday school space, office space.
Okay.
We had a nursery school that was running. Ida Dundas was the director of that. And so that was quite a going concern.
Yeah. So you had lots of space for all this other stuff, but it was the worship space that was sort of that was a bit of the constraint. And so then we have a picture of construction that had started in 1997. So you can see obviously the sanctuary is no longer there. Just a big empty space there as the church is expanding and getting ready to grow. And so what was the sort of hope or vision there? Like, it was a growing church at that point?
Absolutely. We were growing quickly. We had lots of young families. I remember when we were raising the money to do the construction.
Yeah.
We rolled a cement mixer, so we were meeting in the school at St. Hazel's, and we rolled a cement mixer up the middle, and people were to put their commitments for the building fund in an envelope, throw them in the cement mixer.
Okay.
And the kids were dancing behind. There was music, and the kids were dancing, and it was marched up, and we raised the commitments for everything that we needed, which was just amazing. I mean, God was so good to us because we needed parking.
Yeah.
For example, we were trying to figure that one out. That was one of the toughest problems. And then just before our annual vestry, the lot across the street came up for sale. And we were able to very quickly put together an offer. And I think I want to say it was within 30 days we had acquired that parking from when it went to.
Okay, so that same parking lot that we use now.
Yeah, exactly. The parking lot that we have across the street. At the time, there was a salon in the front, of course, because this is Streetsville.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Very cool.
Then it became a police station.
Station for a while.
Okay, interesting. Lots of different things happening there.
And we still had our offices underneath the old parish hall area. We're still meeting there.
Yeah. Okay. So then April 26th, 1998 hits, and we have this very dramatic photograph of the church fire. And we have these history books of the church, and this image of the steeple on fire, the roof, you can't even see it there anymore. And I've been told that the kids will walk by and see these little books, and they're all very intrigued by this particular photograph because they want to know the story of what happened. And so I'm wondering if you folks can take us back to that day, April 26th, 1998. Where were you? How did you hear about this? What was your sort of reaction to that? Do you want to start, Wally?
Yeah, sure. I remember it distinctly. Jane and I were, it was a Saturday night. Jane and I were going out for dinner. And I said, before dinner, can we swing by the church and check on the construction? Because it was something that we just kind of did every day.
Sure.
And we came by here and checked on it to see how it was. And everything was in pretty good shape. And then we went out to dinner. And we got home and went to sleep. And around, I'm going to say it was close to midnight, the phone rang. And it was Diane that called me. And she said, Wally, there's a fire at the church. I didn't ask any question. I just said, I'll be there in 5 minutes. I hung up and got dressed very quickly. And, as I'm getting dressed, I'm praying, God, small fire.
Yeah.
I get out in my driveway. I live south of Eglinton here. I got out in my driveway. I could already smell the smoke. By the time I turned on to Mississauga Road, I could see the flames.
Wow.
You told me you'd gone in the building
Yeah, we had gone in the building on the Saturday.
The day before.
Yeah,
A few hours
Yeah,
before.
they had just completed the roof, and I saw the rolls of tar paper. I stepped over them actually to come in, and it was those rolls of tar paper that the young man set aflame later that night. Yeah.
Wow.
And the stained glass window that we have now in there,
Yes.
it used to be over the altar, and it had been taken out and
Yes.
stored. And because we were getting close to finishing the construction, the crate, whatever, holding the stained glass window had been brought back in, and it was laying on the floor of the church. And well, there's a story in that.
Yeah. So we can see the picture there. You can see so it was in a wooden or
Well, it was in
cardboard crate of some kind.
Crate. But it was
So all of the wood around the windows is completely charred. The window itself is quite black. It's hard to see through. But this is the same window that now sits in our sanctuary.
That's right. And it was restored with funds from the Bread and Honey Festival.
Okay.
In memory of Sam McCallion, who was the chairman or convener of that event. And so now it's in our new building, which is lovely. I think it was restored. There was a company down the street here.
Yeah, it was called Red Hill Art Glass. It's where there's a coffee shop now.
Okay.
Yeah, and they restored it there.
That's right. It's hard to really describe how miraculous it is that stained glass survived. I mean, there were steel beams that were twisted and warped and fallen from the heat. It was an incredible fire, as you saw from the picture. And right in the middle of it was this stained glass window.
Yeah.
And yet it wasn't undamaged, but it was restorable, which was amazing.
Yeah. Very cool.
I heard about the fire. Harold called me. Dave and I had been out to a play or some kind of event and had gotten home and had received the call. And so we quickly drove over here, parked at Tim Hortons, and I remember running down the street to get down here to the parking lot. And we stood out in the parking lot watching the firemen work on the building.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
I was working on the staff at the church. As director of programming and parish life. And I did that for 24 years. And so I was pretty much involved in things around here. And had my office downstairs and everything was gone.
Yeah. So then what was it like being part of this congregation in the weeks and the months after that fire? I'm sure there's a lot of sense of grief and loss.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the nice things was that parishioners, Ross and Davis Mitchell, invited our staff to come over to their house and set up our offices in their basement. So we were there for several weeks, I think, until we looked and found a warehouse on Century Avenue up by Argentia, and we were able to rent that big open warehouse. And I worked on a floor plan of designing the different spaces that we could set up in there for offices and some meeting rooms, and there was a little kitchenette and washroom and stuff, so we could have our 8 o'clock traditional worship service there, and we have
in
meetings.
the warehouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
And meeting rooms there, and we had our offices there, and we could have meetings and midweek kind of things, and then we still worshiped at St. Hazel's.
Yes.
And everybody moved there.
Yep.
And then we had at least one service at Meadowvale Theater.
Okay.
I think an Easter service.
Sure.
You remember anything else?
I just think it's worth mentioning. You mentioned Ross and Davis Mitchell. Ross Mitchell, unfortunately, is no longer with us. He passed away a few years ago. But Ross was just such an integral part of all this. When Harold and I designed the church on a napkin. It wouldn't have gotten much further than that if we hadn't asked Ross to be the head of the building committee.
Sure.
Ross was absolutely a force to be reckoned with, and he made sure through the first building project, through the fire, through the second building project. I remember Ross saying to me one time, it's a good. He and I were both entrepreneurs and had our own business. He said, "It's a good thing we have our own business, because if we worked for anybody else, we would have been fired for all the time we're spending at the church."
Sure. Yeah. There's one more photo I want to share of the church itself. So obviously there was a lot of damage done to the church, but then not there. The bell tower, I think, was not entirely damaged. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
It was.
It was destroyed.
Okay.
Because the fire was set underneath
Right.
the
Okay.
tower.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
like a chimney.
After the fire, what was left here? So, I had the unfortunate distinction of maybe being the only warden to sign 2 demolition orders for the church. The first demolition order was partial demolition to prepare for the renovations.
Yep.
The second one was complete demolition.
Right.
This place we're sitting in was literally just a hole in the ground for about a year while we tried to settle up the insurance
Yeah, so you
claim.
can see in the image there that they're clearing away all of the bricks. There's really not much left there.
There was literally nothing. We preserved some of the brick, which has
Yep.
been used downstairs and behind the altar.
Yeah.
But no, there's nothing. I can say there's nothing left of the original structure, because
Yeah.
it was literally
Totally,
just dug
totally.
out, and we started from scratch.
Yeah. And then another picture from the newspaper that I want to share with you folks, because you are actually featured in this picture. So at the top there, we have Wally and Diane, along with Harold Percy, who was the minister at the time, and Hazel McCallion, who is, of course, famous mayor of Mississauga, but also a member of this church. All just...
And Ross Mitchell.
And Ross
Ross.
Mitchell as well. Okay, yeah, that we were just talking about.
And I remember standing outside when they removed the old bell from the tower. That's what's happening there.
Yes.
The bottom picture.
And that bell is out in the lobby right now.
Yes, yeah.
And then you see the sign out in front.
Right.
It talked about, we had Rising from the Ashes.
Yeah, very cool. And so the sub-headline of this was that it was a teen who started this fire. But then there's actually quite an amazing story that comes along with that. So do you want to share a little bit about how this teen became sort of a little bit of part of Trinity's life for a little while anyway?
Yeah. So, there were 3 young men that came into the church, and one of them started the fire. One of the other ones, I guess, was apprehended and gave his name. So it was fairly quickly that the young man that started the fire was apprehended. My recollection is he was 17. I think
that's what that line
underage.
said. Yeah.
So actually, Harold and Diane and I were invited to the courthouse.
Okay.
When he was being tried, and the judge asked Harold to recommend, sentencing. He said, by default, this young man would go to prison.
Right.
And, what would you like? And I think, Harold, you said sought some advice, I think, from somebody for that.
Lou Smeads was a famous professor at Fuller Seminary, and he wrote some books, and Dave connected Harold with Lou Smeads, and he made some recommendations of how to make it a more healing process for everyone.
Sure.
And so he was, the sentence was that he was to do, set up and take down chairs do 200 community hours, and that was part of taking up and setting up chairs at the school. Used to do some lawn work here at the church. He was to give 10% of his part-time job money, and he was to make a public apology to the congregation. And that was an amazing experience. We were over at the school and packed auditorium there, and he and his mother came, and he got up and made an apology, and it's written out in one of the books we've got out on display. And it was really an emotional experience for everyone, but it was a very healing experience for the congregation too.
Yeah.
It was known as a service of forgiveness, and it was really important for us to go through that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really neat to sort of think about that from the lens of what it means to be a church.
That's right.
What it means to be a follower of Jesus, right? Because, so like you said, the sort of default sentence would have been prison, which is a space of isolation, right? It's a space where we take people to get them out of our community. But instead, what the church was able to offer was community and integration, right? And yes, sort of community service hours. There was some hard work that was involved in that. But community service in the context of community, in the context of being part of this church family. I think that must have felt, I'm sure there's a lot of emotions wrapped up in that.
A lot of tears.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I think it was, and I'll credit Harold for this. It was sort of a model of how to deal if you've been wronged.
Yep.
How do you deal with it? And I think forgiving is more important maybe for the victim than the perpetrator, right? Because you have to learn to let go of it. The other thing was, I think that was maybe the most covered church service in Mississauga. We had news vans out, and that for that apology service, and it showed the community what was going on, and the community rallied around the church in an incredible way. Hazel did a fundraiser up at
Delta Hotel.
At the Delta Hotel, and raised money from the community. People were just showing up with donations. Other churches that had been, experienced fires were sending donations. So, it was incredibly affirming just to feel the support of the community.
Sure.
And that's a big part of how, I think we built some connections into the community at the time while we didn't have a building.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing is that we had a connection with St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church down the street from us.
Yes.
Where Doug McQuaig was the pastor there. And we were permitted to have some services there. We had, they could use it for weddings or funerals, and we had our annual lamb dinner there one year.
Okay.
And now we have Doug, and when Doug retired, he and his wife, Liz, started coming to Trinity. And his son, Scott McQuaig, is a drummer and looks after the sound and lighting. And his wife is Libby McGrath, who's our music leader and worship leader. And so it's amazing. We still have that connection.
Lots of family connections, community connections, all of these things. Yeah, very cool. Yeah. So now we're moving along in the story towards rebuilding, and we have one last photo to share of the rebuilding the bell tower at the church. And you can sort of see at the bottom there, reopening spring of 2000. So there's this real new momentum, new process underway. So what was that rebuilding process like? How did that get started? What was involved in that? And there were some limitations before. So there's still limitations?
Well, that was a really interesting time because we did actually see an opportunity coming out of the fire in that before. As you saw, there was the old church building, the middle hall built in 1930, the parish hall built in 1962, and the big empty courtyard in the middle.
Right.
So we couldn't, because of some restrictions, we had to work within that kind of footprint of the building.
Sure.
But after the fire, and we had a hole in the ground, well, now we said, okay, now we can recapture that space because it would be more economical to just build a big envelope, which is what we have now, just basically a big rectangle over the whole space. So we actually ended up picking up a lot of usable space in the new configuration. The problem with that was, and I remember it distinctly because we had a meeting down at St. Andrew's, and Doug McQuaig was kind enough to allow us to meet there. And we were going to present the new plans, and I talked to the insurance company, and they said, don't worry, we're going to cover you for replacement costs. And so we went down there to unveil the new plans and get everyone excited about the building.
Yeah.
And like literally hours before the meeting, I got a call from the insurance company, and they said, yeah, so here's the number you're going to get. I'm going to say it was something like 500,000. I'm like, no, we need 1.5 million.
Yeah.
And I remember going into that meeting, I've never prayed so hard in my life as going in front of the congregation to say, yeah, we can't rebuild right now. And we sat with that hole in the ground for a full year while we tried to work out the insurance.
Wow.
Eventually we did. I'm pleased to report that we got, my recollection is 1.8 million by the time we were done, because when we had to go through, we actually found other items that were, should have been covered by insurance.
Sure.
So ultimately that all got settled, and that's when we were able to start rebuilding again.
Okay.
But it was quite a time. I'll tell just one other story really quick.
Yeah.
While this was all happening, Hurricane Mitch hit in the Honduras.
Okay.
And it was devastation, and Dave was head of World Vision at the time, and brought it to the attention of the board and said, could Trinity do something? And I know we're doing great things now in Nueva Frontera, but our first, forage into Honduras was then. And I remember being in a board meeting, and it came up, and we said, okay, what can the church do to help the victims of the hurricane? And somebody said, oh, you know what? It's not the time. We're trying to rebuild the church. We don't have the insurance.
Yeah.
And somebody else on the board said, well, you know what? These people were hit with this storm, and they're homeless. And we're homeless. We should understand what they're going through. And this is the time for us to step up. And we did. And I was really encouraged at how the church supported that and reached out. And that became a big project. We built a computer training center that hundreds of people were able to get jobs as a result of that. So there was a lot. And we built, I think, a school, right? A small schoolroom.
We went down and visited
Yeah.
in Honduras there.
Yeah, there were several trips that went down. So it was, again, something good that, this is the amazing thing. I mean, God, we go through terrible things in our life sometimes, right? It's a tough world. But God can redeem things in wonderful and unexpected ways.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. Diane, when you think about that rebuilding time, how did you see God at work in that?
Well, certainly a sense of community working together, supporting one another and being behind that, and just seeing it all come together was just amazing.
Yeah.
And still new people were coming to the church, even though we were meeting over at St. Hazel's.
Yeah.
And it was still growing. And so the grand opening that weekend, we had a big event for the community and tours of the building and out in the parking lot. We were all set up with refreshments and stuff, and just a lot of excitement about coming together and how we were able to reach out to a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that sort of stands out to me in this whole bringing all the pieces together is just the way that Trinity was able to be a witness, a presence in this community of what it means to go through really hard things, to lose everything as a church, but to remain faithful.
Yeah, when we had the bread and honey parade.
Yeah.
Always a big deal at Trinity because congregation would sit out in front of the church and watch the parade go by, and Hazel was always trooping along in front of it. Yep. And we had a big banner that we had in the parade that one year that said "Rising from the Ashes," and a big float that we had with a band and people on it and everything. And so it was really a wonderful witness to the community.
And I mean, I also just go back to that story of bringing this youth into the community of doing the hard work of love in the midst of the hard stuff of life. Yeah. So when you reflect on the past 25 years now that this building has been open, what stands out to you? How have you seen Trinity grow? How have you seen God at work in the last 25 or so years? Do you want to start us off, Wally?
Sure. So I think we've been through our ups and downs.
Yep.
Time won't permit to describe all of them, but let's
Sure.
just say there was a bit of a roller coaster. Certainly, moving into the new building was a high, but there were lows that came along
Sure.
the way. But I think what I've seen, particularly in the last few years, is just how God has blessed the church with people coming from different backgrounds,
Yeah.
different ages, a lot more young families and kids that we see. And just the energy in the community. Trinity has always been, like throughout the highs and lows, Trinity has always had this very strong sense of community and just support for one another. And that's been great. But I think the energy can kind of wax and wane over the decades.
Sure.
And I just love the energy that's in the church now. It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I think one of the most noticeable things is the broad ethnic group that we represent. Mm-hmm. And people from all over the world are coming to Trinity.
Yeah.
And that's really lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like when I think about our current congregation, there are some folks like yourselves who have been here for 30 or more years, but there are lots of folks who are very new to this congregation. Like even myself, I was saying, I've been here 3 or 4 years maybe. And so don't know this long history of God's faithfulness, this history of Trinity showing up as a space of love and light, even in the midst of devastation, right? And so I think to hear all of this, to think about, this is who we are. This is our DNA, even if we don't know that that's our DNA.
That's right.
Like there's something about this story that forms us as a community together. And so I'm really grateful to both of you for sharing your perspectives on this to get us thinking about this in a little bit of a different way. Yeah. So thank you both so much.
Right.
Thank you, Kyla.
Yeah. And thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Trinity Talks. I'm so grateful for whatever role you play in our church community, even if it's just listening to this podcast or if it's coming on Sunday mornings. Thank you for being part of this legacy, this story of rebuilding together and trusting that God will continue to sustain us into the future. And we will see you again next week.